All right, folks, here we go with the notes for Chapter 4, talking about different theories of management, different philosophies of how to be a leader and manager and organizer, if you will. One thing we can say is that management is a process. What do we mean by process? Well, the term process describes a series of actions or events that are marked by change. In other words, something happens and then something else happens in a transformative sort of way so that the process becomes something that is transformative. There is change that happens as a result of the process. Most of the time, a process is used to define a continuous operation in which many things are happening simultaneously. So you picture a mechanism, an engine, if you will, an organism with many different parts and elements, all of those things working at the same time. So that can also be considered a process. Management is often considered to be a process because of its ongoing state of operation. It doesn't stop and pause at any point. There's always something that is happening, always something that has to be monitored, always something that has to be evaluated. Management in the electronic and digital media is not a static concept, but it's a dynamic, evolving process involving many responsibilities, leadership, and a sense of entrepreneurship. So you have that aspect of many things going on at the same time. Those things are in a constant state of transformation and change, whether it's the logistics that are changing, the rationale for why we are doing things, the people that we are working with, whether it's those that we are responsible to, the employees, those that we are responsible for, upper management, and their decisions and all that sort of thing. There's always something that is continually evolving. Let's talk about some approaches to management. We'll talk about some in a historical context first, and we'll start with the classical school of management. This was very much in prominence from the late 1800s through into the early 1920s. And this is associated with the Industrial Revolution, which marks a shift from agrarian-based, that's farming, agriculture, to industrial-based societies. And as a philosophy, the study of management centered on practical measures, primarily improving the means of production and increasing productivity among workers. The ability to have interchangeable parts, to have many machines that were built the exact same way and do the exact same thing, and to be able to do those things on scale gives a lot more productivity to people that are operating those machines to be able to make more of a thing. 3 different approaches to management in the classical school. First off, scientific management. This was brought about by Frederick Taylor, and this theory presented a systematic approach to the challenge of increasing production. Very much a logistical sort of thing. The scientific management approach introduced several practices, including determination of the most effective way to coordinate tasks. So you have this system of operations that is happening, whether it is people and or machines that are specializing in one specific part of the production process, or if perhaps there is a focus for the entire company to focus on one piece or one part of the process, then move on to something else. There's some sort of logistic that's happening in order to streamline and systemize the way that things are being done. Careful selection of employees for different positions. What does someone do well? Put that person into that particular position. Proper training and development of the workforce. Help them to be able to know their job even better so they can produce more. And introduction of economic incentives to motivate employees. In other words, workers would be more productive if they received higher wages in return for their labor. So the idea that the more that one produced, the more that one could make. And each part of the production process received careful scrutiny toward the goal of greater efficiency. Get as much done as you can in as short of a period of time and with as little effort as you possibly can, so that you can continue to build your strength in those ways and be able to do the most or the best that you possibly can. Another thought in the classical school was that of administrative management. Henry Fayol came up with this idea. The functions of management are detailed in such a way as to aid managers with planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, and controlling functions. So the things that happen within the office, if you will. Management principles must be flexible enough to accommodate changing circumstances. So there's this idea of the living, breathing ethos where perhaps things need to change and evolve over time for various reasons. Management being a process, again, that idea of change and evolution as conditions warrant. And Fayol, as a part of this idea, brings about 14 different principles of management. They are in your textbook, and you can take a look at all of these different things that show how, from the administrative standpoint, management works, including such things as division of work, authority and responsibility, use of things like division and unity of command, on down to things like centralization, having that idea of productivity still being in there, to putting things in the proper place, the idea of order, and even down to a spirit of harmony. Esprit de corps is what he called it, that it should be promoted among personnel to create this sort of morale state that is going on within the workers. But again, you can look at all those 14 principles in your textbook. Thirdly, bureaucratic management. This came about from Max Weber. The use of a hierarchy would enable an organization to produce at its highest level. Think of when companies put together flow charts or organization charts of where different people are within the company. This would be an offshoot of that sort of idea. Some of the concepts include clear division of labor and management, strong central authority, a system of seniority. If you've been there the longest, then you have more power. Strict discipline and control with clear procedures and policies. Things are rather black and white when it comes to how things are being handled. And a careful selection of workers based primarily on technical qualifications. Do they have the ability to do the job? How some of these things went into practice would be, again, organizational flow charts, things like job descriptions, what are people expected to do when they're in a certain position, and specific guidelines for promotion and advancement. Do they check all the boxes? Do they meet all the requirements in order to continue working or to move forward, move upward? The Human Relations School of Management, this came about after the classical school. This was developed in the 1930s and 40s. It recognized that managers and employees were, in fact, members of the same group, and thus shared in the accomplishment of organizational objectives. Employees had needs other than just wages and benefits. With these needs being met, workers would be more effective, and the organization would benefit. So we're dealing with more than just productivity. We're dealing with more than just efficiency. We're starting to think of people not just as cogs in the machine, but we're thinking of them as people, these complex creatures that have various needs and wants and desires. The Hawthorne studies determined that increased attention to employees and interaction with supervisors led to greater productivity. Workers felt a greater affinity to the company when they felt that managers showed interest in their employees and in their work. So things like positive affirmation, dealing with an employee outside of just the black and white aspects of the job and the goal and things like that, developing on a certain level a relationship of sorts. The term Hawthorne effect has come to describe the impact of management attention on employee productivity. Employees have social as well as physical and monetary needs. Some people might call this a more holistic approach to relationships within the workplace and looking at somebody, again, as someone of unique and complex value and understanding some of the inner workings of a person in order for that person to have a certain sense of fulfillment and therefore would be more invested in the job that he or she is involved with. The hierarchy of needs, you may remember this if you've taken psychology classes or sociology classes. Abraham Maslow brought this about. As one level of needs is met, other levels of needs become important to the individual. As these levels are met, the progression through the hierarchy continues. Everyone has these particular needs, but some of them are more important than others. We start at the bottom of the pyramid with the physiological. Physiological needs are for the essentials of physical survival: food, water, shelter, clothing. Depending, if you've listened to various financial experts, they call these the four walls of basic life and security. To be able to have these basic needs met is paramount and more important than anything else, because if you're not being fed, if you're not being hydrated, if you're not sleeping at night, then, well, really nothing else matters. Safety or security needs are satisfied only after the basic physiological needs are met. Safety concerns the need to be free of the threat of physical danger and to live in a predictable environment. So knowing what to expect is very important. Having that sense of some sort of regularity or some sort of kind of common sense cause and effect that is going on around and about you. This is where ideas of science, the way the world works, and maybe even on an emotional level, what we kind of think of as fairness would play into this area. Social needs include the need to belong and to be accepted by others. Go back to high school and think about the relationships that you had there and how all of that worked. It's really, as far as the needs and desires, it's not much different in the rest of aspects of life as well. We have this desire to be loved and valued and appreciated. Those things are important to us in order for us to be whole people. Next up on the pyramid is esteem. This can be thought of in terms of both self-esteem, feeling good about yourself, and recognition from others. You know, in the words of Stuart Smalley, the great philosopher from Saturday Night Live, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me. So there's that idea of having that sense that you have significance and worth and purpose. And then at the top of the pyramid, self-actualization. This is the desire to become what one is capable of being, the idea of maximizing one's potential. This is where you've kind of pretty much gotten to the place where you can kind of choose your own lot in life, or destiny, if you want to use that word. that idea of having a certain amount of self-sufficiency, self-confidence, all these things coming together to the point where you have options and decisions, and, well, the world is your oyster, as some would say. Each individual is motivated by different needs. Individuals respond differently through the life cycle. So we can talk about that hierarchy of needs in a rather broad sort of sense. The way that they manifest in people is going to be different. Even just think about the basic structure, the physiological needs, the way that we consume food. Some people will eat anything and everything. Some people prefer low carb diets, a lot of protein and meats and things like that. Other people prefer vegetarian diets, and then, on and on through the scope of different ways that you can develop eating habits. So those are kind of easy for us to think about. But when it comes to things more like the mental and the social, the way that we respond to different types of activities and different types of reactions, those things make humans a little more complex, and to try to understand those in a certain way is going to help us to be able to relate to people, and therefore be able to help us to relate to people in the workplace in order to try to meet people where they're at, and to be able to put people into positions where they're going to be able to excel, not just because of skill, but because of the way that they think about things and the way that they approach things, and what affects them on a emotional and mental level. Managers may require different motivational techniques to motivate different people according to their needs as a result. Some people do better with a very structured sort of paradigm, people being deadline driven or required to achieve a certain level. Other people needing more creativity and opportunity to ponder certain things. Some people like to troubleshoot. Other people like to have things laid out in an outline. And understanding how people react to different structures will help managers be able to structure the way that they approach them with certain tasks and projects. Hygiene and motivator factors. This comes to us from Frederick Hertzberg. Hygiene factors represent the work environment. They include not just technical and physical conditions, but also such factors as company policies and procedures, supervision, the work itself, wages, benefits, all the things that surround the workplace, surround the worker. These are factors that are going to impact the way that productivity happens, the way that workers respond to the work that they are given, all those sorts of things that we can almost kind of think of it in terms of our environment and its impact on the health of the worker and of the organization as a whole. Motivators involve aspects of the job such as recognition, achievement, responsibility, and individual growth and development. So, good, healthy habits, just as they help do a body good, healthy habits in terms of the work environment, the way that we treat people, the way that we respond to people's needs, is also going to create a healthy environment in terms of the kind of the air of the place that we work in, as well as the results of what the company and its workers can do. All right, let's take a look at some theories now. Theory X and Theory Y from Douglas McGregor. Theory X emphasized the use of control tactics, threats, and even coercion to motivate employees. So think of the slave driver with the whip, cracking that whip, produce more, do more, work harder, quit slacking off on the job, all those sorts of things. Under Theory Y, managers integrated the needs of the workers with those of the organization. The manager's role centered on matching the talents of the individual with the proper position in the organization and providing an appropriate system of rewards. So you're now taking a look at the job at hand, the workers available, matching the worker with the proper skill set with the position that needs to be done, and creating an environment where you encourage that person to do well, and as they do well, there are incentives and rewards for the employee as a result. Theory Z from William Alchey cites employee participation and individual development as important components of organizational growth. Interpersonal relations between workers and managers are stressed. So again, we kind of have that idea of taking a look at the work environment, not just as a place to produce, but you're taking this more holistic sort of approach where you're keeping in mind the mental and the psychological aspects of people and their needs in cooperation with what the needs are for the company. The classical school proposes managerial efficiency and control, while the human relations school endorses employee needs and wants. However, neither approach really takes into account the importance of effectiveness, the actual attainment of organizational goals. So there's strengths and weaknesses in both of those schools of thought, the classical school and the human relations school, in that, yes, a company is ultimately trying to make money and earn a profit, and productivity is going to have a huge part in what happens there. We also need to have happy employees that feel like they have purpose and fulfillment and all those sorts of things, but you don't necessarily want one to overly dominate the other. So there needs to be something that, while we don't neglect those two sides of the coin, well, maybe there's a third side to the coin. We'll take a look at that in the second half of this video. Join me over on part B.